Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome. I'm sitting here with Saadiah Klein
It's a pleasure to be here.
from Yeshiva University,
Indeed.
originally from England,
From London.
from London. Okay,
Yeah,
the holy
born and
city of
raised.
London.
Exactly.
I heard the Rebbe said England. England means like a little, I think Eng means narrow a little bit.
Definitely that's the mentality.
Right, I think that's
I'm
what it
coming
is.
to America. I'm realizing everyone loves to refashion themselves every day. But in England, we keep to the straight and narrow.
Right, this okay. Good to be a little traditional. And you're also director at Guard Your Eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll state your age just because I think it's relevant in terms of the contract. You're 21.
21.
Okay, so you and I spoke about a year ago, and you came across my work on
Social media.
social media about pornography, talk about my story, etc. And you have your own story, and you began doing this work fairly young.
Yeah, 16 is when I first started to engage with other teenagers my age on the issues.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you got into it. I've been very interested because pornography is a beast. It's a full scale. If we're thinking like, I don't know, a game with an enemy, I mean, it's a massive.
I think it's the biggest black hole in this world. I really do. I think it's the biggest shared problem, at least digital problem among humanity. We've got things like climate change, etc., which are certainly slightly bigger, but if the people are zombies, then it doesn't really matter how the world is, you know?
I hear you.
And this is a rot from the bottom up, that if you have a phone in your pocket, you're susceptible. And that's pretty much most of the planet now.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So what I've thought about is that, I got into pornography when it was hard to access porn.
right,
So whether it was on a desktop computer,
right.
which, sitting in the middle of the living room is not the most convenient place to sit and watch porn. Even then, easier than possibly times before.
Right.
But for the most part, like a lot of the guys I knew who got into it were with movies, magazines. I mean, that was...
Those movies and
Yeah.
magazines, you had to walk to the R-rated store.
Yes.
You had to go and you had to purchase it, hand it to someone else.
Especially as a teenager.
If you're underage, yeah, right. So certainly that was a very different experience to the present day.
Yeah, and nevertheless, I and many of my friends, many of the people my age, got sucked into it. I can only imagine what it would be like if at 12 or 13 years old and I had the same insatiable appetite towards pornography and all I needed to do was go to the bathroom with my phone.
Indeed, and I wish it was 12 or 13 years old, but, kids have screens younger and younger these days. I mean, my 5-year-old brother has an iPad and a tablet or whatever it is, like most other kids.
Right.
And, whilst I don't imagine that my 5-year-old brother is searching up X, Y, and Z, although he may do at 9, which is what our case was, innocent searches, which leads to, the internet has a quick algorithm to take you where it wants to take you.
Right.
But, you click on a cookie or you go on some website and change your life forever,
Yes.
So that was my scenario.
You remember a couple of years ago, maybe my son was 3,
Right.
driving him to school, and on the way there was a building we passed with a courtyard,
Right.
and there was a statue of a nude woman.
Right.
And just how many times as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, he commented on this.
Right.
On the
Naked.
statue.
Yeah.
Right, so imagine on
We're
the
obsessed
internet.
from our naked bodies from the time we're 2 or 3, So, of course, that curiosity is there. I mean, science says that sexual attraction begins in young children already. I think versus to their mother, etc. But that's definitely a reality. And the world is so sexualized. Everywhere you look, there's light pornography. So it's obviously going to catch people younger and younger.
Okay, so talk to me about, I'm interested in your own journey and experience with it, and then into you helping people, obviously at a
Right.
very young age, 16 years old, to start.
So the journey goes as follows. When I was 8 years old, me and my brother were staying at our grandparents' home, and it was late at night, and we had a TV control, and we were flicking through the channels, and you get to a certain channel, it's like these cool hotline channels where it's essentially a topless woman, and that was the first time we were exposed to the fact that like we have these bodies and we can use them in a particular sexual
You said you and your
manner.
brother.
Me and my brother.
So he was older, younger?
He was 2 years older than me.
2 years older, okay.
That was the first time that happened. Okay, fine. Still had no understanding of what sex was. It was just about, you could see naked people, essentially.
Right.
Then
Before you go, let's slow down a little bit. Do you remember anything about your feelings or thoughts that's
100%,
related to that?
100%. It was this gushing hot sensation across my face. Like I just broken into a new dimension of the world. But I remember being absolutely enticed. I was 8 years old, but I was absolutely enticed. Um, but again, like this was just like a topless woman. It was nothing more than that. So it was an immature, childish excitement. It wasn't like a strong sexual drive. But that was that. And then
But it certainly left an impression.
certainly had an impression. Certainly opened my mind to there's this whole world of adults that I don't really understand. And maybe 6 or 7 months later, I'm at my friend's house, and like innocent kids, what do you search up, like naked ladies or something like that? Again, that's all you're thinking of in your head. Straight to the hub, and you click on that, and your life changes forever. And
Okay, so you're speaking almost about another. You're speaking about yourself, but also as another person. So just to
Right.
make sure I understand what happened. So you're sitting there 6 or 7 months later after this experience
Right.
at your grandparents' house.
Yeah,
You search up naked ladies or some.
with my friends.
Someone called me last week and said their 9-year-old son searched on their phone. I think pretty girls, right?
Right.
And all sorts of stuff come up
Right,
as well.
right, exactly. So that was one click, and then life changed forever.
From their straight pornography.
Straight pornography. And that was just me and my friend. But within a week, it was me and 3 friends. Then, me and a few other friends. And this was still actually on.
Actually, I want to make sure our language is understood. Because when we say straight pornography, there's nudity, and what you're talking about is
Just
full
pornography,
scale.
like you would go on a porn website.
Yeah.
It was pornography.
Right.
Straight through. We're just turning 9 years old. And yeah. And, we started bringing our friends. This was on a friend's family device. It was on a family device because we didn't have phones yet. We had phones by 12, 13 years old.
Right.
We didn't have phones then, but we had iPads. And once you have an iPad and you're on holiday, 12 years old, hours at night,
So at that stage, it became regular.
it became regular.
So this is interesting for me because as a child, and I don't know if it was the friend group or the school that I'm in, when I watched pornography or my other friends got into it, I think it was a very solo experience. Like there was a certain amount of shame that was attached to it. I do remember there was one kid who came to school once with a deck of cards of porn stars.
Really?
And shared it around and shared it with others. But he was actually viewed as a little bit off by at least me and my friends and probably the school.
So that wasn't the case. We were, bearing in mind, let's say we're talking about elementary school right now, we're a class of 30. So I had a group of 9, 10 friends who were very happy to quickly share this with each other. And yeah, we kept that going. And actually what I found out later on is that once 1 or 2 of those boys were exposed, I only found this out actually 2 or 3 years ago. Someone told to me, they went and told their social groups, and they were meeting up together to watch pornography too.
Wow, so that's very different than my experience. But talk to me a little bit about the way you grew up religiously.
So I grew up very frum. We were Chabad, and we're talking about like peeling every vegetable on Pesach, like even like the tomatoes. Talking about no books that had any form of any intimacy, not even like kissing in it. Otherwise, that was the end.
So you
of the
went
world.
to Chabad schools growing up?
I did not, but I went to a Haredi school. A Haredi school where, like if you had a television, like that's what they called it. Like if you have a television, you're not like in line with our school ethos, etc., etc. They were not pro-Israel. They weren't anti-Israel, but there was no mention of Israel.
Yeah.
It's like a Haredi school.
Understood. I get it.
Rebbes, black and white, etc., etc. That's how I grew up.
Okay, what's that? So in this, when you're talking about your friends, you're talking about your friends group from a school like this.
Exactly.
9, 10 kids getting together
Exactly.
at 12, 13 years old,
Yeah.
watching hardcore pornography.
10, 11, 12, yeah.
And you think you're the anomaly in this?
No.
case?
Not at all. Not at all. Meaning, throughout my teen years, I've engaged with lots of other then teenagers, speaking about their past experiences. Yeah, it's the same all around, really. We're talking about, by my estimations, over 85% of boys between the ages of 10 to 13 have been exposed to pornography, right? And we're talking about 30% of girls between ages of 10 to 14 being exposed to pornography, and then beyond that, like,
And when you're using the word pornography in this concept,
again,
hardcore pornography.
hardcore pornography. Like,
Yes.
I don't mean like, social media or hardcore pornography.
You're not talking about a rated R scene on a movie.
No, pornography.
Pornography.
And why wouldn't you? If you have this phone in your pocket, parents don't know anything because they just didn't grow up with this. It's one search away. Why wouldn't you go explore? Just as a thought, and then once you're in, boom.
Okay, and when you say exposed to, are you referring to
Either a friend showed it to them, or a sibling showed it to them, or they themselves stumbled across it, or they intentionally searched it up because they heard about it.
Right, I get the exposed to one or two times. You're talking about something else. You're talking about as even before you were a teenager, you and friends getting together
Yeah.
to watch for several hours at a time hardcore pornography.
Several hours at a time. I mean, I can remember one particular time, which was a sleepover, which was several hours. I wouldn't call it several hours. Again, at the start, it was on a desktop,
Yes.
or on a father's iPhone, which we happened to like get him to give us to us because we wanted to play a game or whatever it was, So you didn't have several hours at a time. Once you had your own device in your own bedroom,
Yes.
yeah.
And when kids get their own devices is what? 12, 13, 14, say high school?
I don't know. You tell me about your kids, but
My oldest is 6, so
right, they don't have a device yet.
they don't have a device.
So unfortunately, from my experience, kids are getting devices younger and younger. 7, 8, 6. They have an iPad for like when it's their time to watch movies. It's not in their bedroom the whole time necessarily.
Right.
Or sometimes it is. It's parents unfortunately are a bit too innocent because, like we said, this did not exist in the previous generation. Just didn't. It's crazy.
Right. So you're saying, let's say the way you would raise your kids, right?
Yeah.
Because you've understood it, you've grown up as a child.
I think the next generation is going to have a radically different experience to what my generation had, because we feel like the test bunnies. I know the millennials feel like they were also the test bunnies, and everyone thinks that. But look at the technological reality. We were the test bunnies, and we are going to have a big kickback. I can already see it among my friends, the way we speak. Our kids are going to. Then you never know, because AI, VR, these things are just rapidly growing. They're getting so interwoven into our lives and into our, the kids now are all competent in online schooling from like 6, 7 years old because of Corona. It's a different reality.
Right.
Who knows what will happen in 10 years' time?
Okay, fascinating. So how did you eventually get out of this? This continued for...
I didn't get out of it until I was 18, but I started speaking on it and helping people when I was 16.
How does that work?
So it works as, first you go through the, guilt and shame. And then you realize there's a real problem here. No one is helping us. No one's doing anything. I was always involved in a lot of leadership programs. I was always like the oldest in my year. I was very physically capable, etc., etc. So I had this like role among my friends. I started building these youth organizations just for other reasons. I built 2 schools. One of them still runs autonomously until today. It's pretty cool. I'm going to fly back there now for Pesach, and I'll sit in the back. It has its own rabbi and everything. I'll just smile,
Oh, nice.
It's phenomenal. Camps. I was involved in lots of different camps and etc., etc. So what did I do? First, I was just speaking, just speaking. This is the problem that we're all facing. I know we've been laughing about it at lunch for like the past 4 years, but like it's actually not cool anymore. Like, what it's doing to your brain. You know what it's doing to our academia, to our social relationships, to the fact that we can't hug our mothers anymore, etc., etc., etc. And we got to do something,
Okay, so at what point did you notice it was a problem for you?
By 14.
What did you notice?
How agitated I become, how I sexualized every single human being in my life, the visualizations I was having dawn till night, my inability to focus, my compulsive behavior, my dependency on it, all those signs. Yeah.
Right. Actually, when you said the word, like how you said we can't hug our mother.
I every Friday night, my mother gives me a bracha, and I really struggle to give her a hug back because I'd lost this ability to see physical affection as anything other than sexualized and corruptly sexualized activity, Couldn't do it.
Interesting. It bring me back to a guy I spoke with, probably not much older than you are today, who said that when he was like, one of the traumas of his childhood was, I remember it bringing a lot of pain up when he was talking about it, was that his friends very comfortably sexualizing his mother and talking about her
So that's
all the time.
about that, like our whole teenage, tweenage life was just sexualizing each other's siblings and parents. It's horrendous. When I think back to like the language and the way we were speaking to each other at that age, it's so tragic. And I walk into schools now, I'm speaking in a lot of schools, and I just see it playing out without shame, even in front of the teachers, on the camps. It's horrendous, Yeah, this is the modern day epidemic. No one's doing anything about it, and yeah, I'm just trying
Well,
to
you
scream.
are.
I'm trying. I'm trying. I just wanted to add on a few more things about the experience of being exposed at that young age. We'll get to the science a bit later on. We saw porn before we knew what sex was, right? And once we saw what sex was, and we understood this was the world of adults, we looked at our parents who had never said anything, and our teachers who had never said anything, and we thought this is what they do every night. So we thought one of two things. We either became disgusted with our parents who, as religious kids, were always telling us, don't do this, etc., but now this must be what they're doing because this is the only thing that is. Or B, we thought we'd stumbled across this terrible secret that clearly none of the adults in our lives knew about because we never heard anything, and now we can't talk about it. So we're like holding. Imagine you're like a 9, 10-year-old boy going to school every day, having your multiplication classes or whatever it is, and this is what's in your head. Can't say anything. And then years later, once we were already long addicted, at 15, 16, we start to hear fluffy lectures around the subject. Boys, in this Inyan of Arias, in this Takufa of our lives, we really need to machazek ourselves. I'm not trying to make fun.
Right, I understand.
I want to cry. That's horrendous. That is the counterbalance that we are facing. Hours of hardcore pornography, where a 10-year-old can see in an hour more than the richest king could see in 5 of his lifetimes, versus that. What's going to happen?
Laid out like that, it's very clear. Not what's going to happen, what's happening.
Precisely.
Yeah. Right. I want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. So you're connecting the sexualization, let's say, of amongst your friends or this age group now,
Yeah.
to pornography, meaning the way they're comfortably sexualizing siblings, parents. Like the experience I shared, I never heard that before of someone. It's always interesting. What are the traumas someone walks into adulthood with?
Right.
And what struck me about this guy, he was going through a lot, was that when he spoke about this, the way his friends sexualized his mother and then all sorts of shame that got attached to it, it was one of the more painful memories from his life was this period where his mother was heavily sexualized by his friends, nonstop comments about it. You're saying, A, this is commonplace, and B, you're drawing a straight line between that and heavy use of pornography.
Yeah. And about this traumatic experience, the soul, the neshama, is traumatized by this. I think I heard someone once say that on a scientific basis, that being exposed to pornography at that young age, unwillingly, has the same traumatic impact as being molested. And because your innocence is ruptured so violently. And what I'm saying is that despite that fact being true, we're in a world now where there's no shame about it in that respect because people are confidently and happily sharing it with their friends. So there's a whole added layer on top of the shame, which is still inherently there, of just complete, this detachment, lack of awareness of even like the gravity of what's occurring. It's what it is.
Right, you're saying something negative is happening that's so commonplace you don't even get to put it into the negative bucket.
Like before we even crack into that solid, ironclad heart that's been so traumatized, you first got to pierce through the elephant's skin of, disinterest and apathy towards what's going on.
Understood. Yeah, well said. Okay, so I'm trying to tease apart your experience with your friends because I think it's informative.
Right.
So when you started to bring this up with your friends and said, "Hey, guys, this is a little bit crazy."
Yeah.
How did they respond? Did they agree with you? Did they think you're busting up their party? What was their reaction?
So by that point, everyone kind of agreed. But I would get up one day and say one thing, and then I would joke at the table the other day, you know. So I wasn't even myself a consistent force. As I grew older, I was, but you know, it was like, yeah, in my last thought, you know, like, okay, it is what it is. And the reason for that being is because, let's say I got up and gave a really powerful talk, which it wasn't so powerful. I was 16 years old. So at that moment in time, I'm combating the motivation of pornography with the motivation of my words on that Shabbat afternoon. Let's say it lasted 24 hours. Let's say 24 hours later, the faint glow of that is compared with the raging fire of the motivation for pornography. It's over for everyone, you know.
Understood.
So, not, you know, when.
But that's not my question. Whether it worked, my question is more: was it readily understood?
It was readily understood. It was readily understood. These days now, when I speak to kids, you know, 17, 18, it's understood, but 14, 15, like, their brains are so gooned out. It's like they didn't even realize that, like, it's a problem. You know, didn't even realize it's a problem.
So your assumption is if you walked into a Haredi school today,
where the kids have devices, yeah.
So your assumption is that.
Yeah. Is it Rav Elephant or one big Rav in Lakewood? Is it Rav Elephant? I'm not sure who he is.
Sure.
But my Rav Yaakov, the founder, went to him and said, "What percentage of the
founder of GYE?
Yeah, what percentage of the Balabatim here do you think are struggling with this issue, or you know, the teens?" And he went, "Let me think about it. 100%." You know, that was his words. So if it's 100%, if it's 95%, or if it's 85%, and I promise you that is a very, very, very strong underscore. Not underscore. Underestimation. We're talking about the vast, vast majority. And it's rapidly increasing as exponential content is released in a whole variety of ways with AI. With AI and VR now, I can create child pornography in a few minutes.
So you're saying that if, let's say, our conversation so far,
right,
everything we said, was played on the main screen of a Haredi school, high school, where phones were acceptable.
I'm sure the boys would be very embarrassed.
That no one would blush.
Well, in a Haredi school, I mean, again, like, I come to America, I see all these different categories. There's yeshivish, there's Haredi, there's Orthodox. I'm not quite sure what you refer to.
Okay.
Talking about kids that, like, you know, keep Shabbat,
like
keep kosher, wear tzitzit. They'd probably be embarrassed in front of their rebbeim, but among their friends afterwards, when they go to the bathroom and they speak to each other, it's like, it's a big fat joke, you know?
But what I'm saying is that you wouldn't be introducing anyone to anything.
I'm sure I'd be introducing a few kids to something, but no.
95%.
Yeah. Welcome.
I can hear you. It makes sense. Like I said, it makes sense, although it's not my experience. Like I said, the iPhone came out when I was in my 20s.
And you know, it's not commonly known so much amongst the generation above us because, I mean, in what forum would they find out? Like, the iOS is going to walk around, like, the Office of International Statistics going to take, like, a bunch of 14-year-olds and they're going to tell them everything? No. They're going to track the internet traffic. I don't know how easy that is. The rebbeim are going to sit down and they're going to say, guys, hands up if you're watching pornography, and everyone's going to go, in what forum? I only know this because of my own experience and of all the camps and shuls and schools and community groups that I've worked in. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to your personal. You said from 16 to 18 you were talking about it.
Yeah.
But you didn't stop yourself until around the age of 18. So bring me through that experience, and what was it that
I didn't feel like
go?
I didn't feel like a hypocrite during that whole period, because here's a problem. I'm struggling with it.
Mm-hmm.
Every day I struggle with it. It's affirming that there's a problem. No one's helping us.
I don't see it as hypocrisy at all.
So I didn't see it as hypocrisy, but most people probably would. The shame of, like, being that guy. I mean, like, yeah, the shame of being that guy, you know, who got up and said these things. But it wasn't for me.
It's hypocrisy if you're pretending you have all the answers, not if you're...
Precisely.
Right.
I was just trying to be a friend. I wasn't trying to be a leader. So that was that experience. How did I get out of it? Well, I developed a lot of my own tools over time, which I will share. But the core message that I learned was that you can't take something away from someone without replacing it with something greater. So I needed to reconfigure my entire life with a depth to it and a meaning to it, which was stronger than the attraction of pornography. Life without pornography had to be more attraction than life with pornography and masturbation and all other sexual compulsive behaviors. You know, that is the equation. And how I went about that was several-fold. Um, I wasn't religious as a teenager, even though I was very involved in community groups and schools and schools. I wasn't religious.
But you were going from
No.
schools? No.
So I went to from school for half my teenage years, and then I went to another one, which is not religious school.
Got it.
Sorry. But even when I was at from school, I was socializing with non-Jews and etc. And so I started to look for things. I came across a bunch of different mediums. I got very into dance and other arts. I got very into all spiritual teachings from a vast body of literature. I got very into human relationships, that meaning any kind of human interaction. I had amazing parents. I have amazing parents. I have amazing role models in my life. I was able to be exposed to a lot of the world very young. So I knew what was beyond the four walls of my community. And I just started to engage with it. And slowly, more and more life came in. Once I got to yeshiva, and I was able to be in this new container, this new space of just intimacy in every step you take, if such a person should choose to do that.
What do you mean by that, intimacy in every step you take?
Well, what's intimacy at the end of the day? Intimacy is a profound sense of connection.
Okay.
So by the time I got to yeshiva, I was brought into the idea that there is a source to the universe. I don't call it God. Hashem just means the name, which is the ineffable name beyond all that we can articulate. There is a source to the universe. I am a physical being, a spiritual being in a physical vessel. And if I should play this game right, I can walk with my feet on the ground and my head in the heavens, I could do that. It's quite a strong realization to have at 18 years old. But like I said, I had great role models in my life. And yeshiva was that. We were in Bet Shemesh and a yeshiva called Reshit. It's isolated. It's gorgeous. The facilities are beautiful. The Torah that's taught there, the rabbis there come from many angles. And I just got filled with a lot of fire. And then I also started helping other people. And that's really where things change. When you find yourself in the service of others, then you get to be bigger than just yourself. And then the irritations and the frustrations of your physical flesh, because it's all at the end of the day, sensations of the flesh, become smaller because you are far bigger than that. Despite of this, when you start speaking to Hashem and you create this expansive relationship, the irritation becomes a small dot in the universe that's you. So those experiences, again, I wasn't clean. Once in a while, I'd still fall.
Right.
But once I detached and once I'd, really set my focus on future version of myself, every time I felt, it was no longer like a long chain reaction of all my years, which is what it was until then. It was, you are a beautiful vessel walking on this earth, and today you fell down, and it's okay. Like that. So I explored lots of different mediums, lots of different creative spaces, and they just filled me with a life. What it means to have a body and what it means to be walking in this world. Experience of breathing, if you really do it properly. I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. It's far greater than, that like concave, structure of sat there in your room, in your isolation, with pixels on a screen and friction in your flesh being the sum total of your pleasure in this world. That was it. Yeah.
So what I'm interested to know is if you're able to help others in the same way, meaning, because I think there's a difference, and I'll explain, because I've spoken a lot about pornography. I've helped many people who struggle with pornography. But I think the way you're describing it is actually a little bit different than the kind of people that I've worked with. The kind of people that I worked with, they had very challenging childhoods in their own right.
Right.
And then pornography became an escape.
Right.
An escape that possibly saved their life in their teenage years.
Right.
And they worked hard to achieve that.
Right.
Meaning they worked hard to access it. It's a better way of saying it. To be able to access pornography there was a lot of effort that went into it, and there was a pain that they were anesthetizing on the other side that justified that kind of search, right? They weren't sitting in their room with an iPhone doing a random search. They were working really hard to access the pornography. I was working really hard.
Tell me what you mean about saving their life.
So if there was other pain going on for
Right.
them, whatever it was, they were depressed, they were suicidal, they were completely disconnected from friends, they felt like an outcast, they were, I don't know, their parents were divorced and there was all sorts of turmoil there. They were
Right.
sexually abused multiple times, physically or psychologically abused, whatever it was that they went through. The porn was almost the temporary balm for whatever they were going on, balm, BALM, for what was going on. And then later on in life, looking back, was like, oh, I don't need this anymore. So now I can remove it.
How old were these people when they were going through this experience?
So for myself, I remember when I walked into a recovery meeting at 28 years old,
Okay.
and I was young. I
Okay.
was one of the younger guys
So
in the
you're saying
recovery
that
meeting.
these people who pornography saved their life were adults?
I'm talking people my age.
Right.
Yeah, the people that I've worked with, helped with pornography, I would say that their lives were very difficult before pornography. Pornography temporarily
right.
numbed some of the pain. And then later on, they said, I want to get rid of pornography.
understand
Very
what you're
different
saying.
experience than what you're talking about, which is the pornography was the trauma.
So, right. So, I mean, I could say a lot on those people and their experience. It would be an opinion. But what I can say factually is that for a young child whose neuroplasticity is very, very malleable and their whole psyche can be reconfigured by these forces and it invades every element of their entire physical and spiritual and emotional being, right? There is no savior that pornography is granting them. It is degrading and downgrading their biological being, let alone their emotional being, by the day, over and over again. It does, in fact, trigger momentary stimulation, but that, in fact, is a increasing need for stimulation, decreasing feeling of satisfaction over and over again. And
But what did you hear me say that riled you up?
the idea that this could, in any format, be a tool for support.
Oh. So first, I'm talking about the facts as they are, right? So let's suppose someone was starving of hunger,
Right.
right? And they, the only thing they had to eat was Mike and Ike's. So they ate that in order to,
I imagine that
order
like
to stay
eating
alive.
Mike and Ike's for 3 or 4 days would kill you.
What?
Probably. I imagine actually eating Mike and Ike's for 3 or 4 days only would kill you. Or whatever it is, 10 days, just that.
Maybe yeah, maybe no. But what I'm saying is that it's a qualitatively different experience, right? Someone who's, I'm not saying it's an ideal lifeline. Of course not. The ideal lifeline would be if someone's sexually abused as a child,
Right.
right? What would the ideal lifeline be?
Right.
To go to the adults in their life, share it with them, and then get any support that's needed and move on. Okay? But let's say that's not available to them.
I understand.
I'm not saying they should go to pornography. I'm talking about how the relationship developed with.
I totally appreciate
with-
that. And I'm
right,
even
with
saying that
pornography.
as an adult, I can see how that may be the case, And I can see how, as an adult brain, that could, in fact, to a certain degree, be a method of support in the short term, even if it will require some work afterwards to get over it. I can see that,
Right.
I'm not saying for a second that adults watching pornography is not detrimental to their physical health. Let
Oh
alone
no, I'm
anything
not
else.
talking about adults watching pornography.
So,
I'm
but
talking
what
about
I say for sure is for children, that equation doesn't exist for even a week. That's not it. It can't be a method of support. That's what I'm saying.
right. Okay, so let's go back a little in the conversation. So I'm talking about. I was drawing a distinction between the kind of people it sounds like you helped and the kind of people that I've helped
Right.
in this regard. So the kind of people that I've helped are people who stumbled upon pornography the way I did, for the most part, right? And obviously now I often talk to people who are younger, but I've been doing this, let's say, for 10, 12 years. And most of the people who I've worked with are people who share a similar story to mine.
Right.
And that story is one of childhood trauma,
Right.
independent of the pornography, just childhood trauma. Remember, we're going back to, let's say, the 1990s. Okay, so at that point in time, even if you wanted to access pornography, it's dial-up, right? That you go search an image and it's coming out slowly. That was my experience of pornography.
Insane.
What I did was I would. Some people I heard they would print out these pictures, right? So they had it, or in my case, I would save it on hidden folders in the computer.
Brilliant.
Right. That way I'd be able to access it later. But this took a lot of work. And now if I was on a different computer, I all of a sudden didn't have my stash. So there was the difference between pornography, between pornography in the 1990s and 1970s is one you had a digital stash and one you had a physical stash, but it was still a stash,
Right.
right? I mean, it wasn't. Now you don't need a stash.
Right.
You just need an internet
I
connection.
want you to appreciate the difference between how you're describing your scenario with pornography was, how I'm describing mine in terms of accessibility.
Yes.
And just understand that that difference will multiply itself every year and a half these days. The same disparity between every year and a half moving forward with AI and VR is
Right.
happening again and again and again and again.
Right. So you're saying that a 14, 15-year-old today
That's what a 40,
Has-
15-year-old is going to be
has
exposed
a qualitatively different experience than you had.
Even then, yeah.
Yes.
One such example
Yes.
is that when I was 13, 14, such a thing like OnlyFans was not that common. What does that mean? The whole of social media, which again, Instagram, TikTok did not even exist yet, but Instagram, Snapchat, and those sort of things were only just picking up when I was 13, 14 years old, right? And now, and so you didn't have all these like very, very famous people that everyone followed. Today, teens are following influencers, there's millions of them, who speak to them like we're speaking right now all day long. And then they say, and here's a link at the end. Now go watch, you can watch me have sex, and do all
Right.
these sort of things. And it's like, it's a whole different level of innocence being ruptured, because it's like, now you get to like interact with me and see me like speak about like science, and like I'm a teacher in school every day, or I'm a nurse, or I'm all these sort of things. Here's my regular day.
Right.
Get
There's
to
a
know me.
personal.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And now let's get to VR, and let's get to AI, and the fact that I can create anything now. And yeah, I mean,
Right. You're dragging someone into a complete virtual world.
it's different.
Right. Okay. So just back to the point I was making. So in my case, as I was helping myself, what became very important was not to stop at the pornography, but actually to go back further into the childhood trauma, look
Right.
at any of those effects. Why did I start
Right.
looking at pornography? It was to soothe some of this pain,
Right.
see how that's not the correct or a healthy way to do it, and there are other ways to get it. So let's say there was trust that was ruptured, and there's a desperate need for connection,
Right.
and the best someone can get is this false connection that pornography offers.
Right.
So the healing is real connection, which is the gateway to that is building trust.
Right.
So very often in fellowships and communities is a deep level of trust that's created, and that acts as a counterbalance. So now
Right.
what you're talking about is something very different.
Right.
So what you're talking about is kids who otherwise had a good childhood,
But that's the trauma.
and the trauma itself is the pornography, which makes sense a lot what you're saying about someone who doesn't even know about sex and views pornography. It's as if they're sexually abused, because one way I've understood sexual abuse, instead of saying the words was I sexually abused, they say was my sexuality abused.
Right.
And when you put it that way, it opens up a whole different way of looking at it. It's, an 8-year-old who all of a sudden is introduced to this very, very graphic, hardcore pornography world with even maybe one-time access, but certainly with regular access, their whole definition of
Absolutely.
sexuality is abused. It's ruptured.
Absolutely. And I'll make one or two other caveats on this, which is that there are plenty of kids who have had traumatic childhoods. I had significant trauma in my childhood, outside of this. And of course that, stays with them, and then this fills up that void, and then it's a whole different level of addiction and attachment, even though the pornography in its own right is enough of a trauma.
Yes.
That still exists. Think about how many kids must be growing up in, traumatic homes.
Yeah, of course.
So that's one thing. And the other thing is that today's day and age, I mean, the world itself, just to live in this world, how detached it is from reality is so traumatic in itself. But if you have 4 5-year-olds, 3 4 5-year-olds today, which is the case, who are watching an hour or 2 or 3 hours of, I don't know, Coco Melon a day or whatever these children's shows are, which is like the equivalent of crack cocaine for their little brains, all the flashing colors, all the definitions, the moving images, then by the time they are 8 or 9 years old, they are already addicted to this pixel on the screen experience. So they already have this whole mechanism of like desperate need for like, I mean, I watch what these kids, how my siblings and how my friends' siblings, etc., respond when they have their devices taken away from them. It's a meltdown.
Right.
Meltdown. And that didn't exist the generation beforehand. iPads weren't there when I was 4 years old.
What do you think about schools giving instructions on iPads? And
It's just so limited. Like, I mean, I definitely think that schools should, implement that, like, we do not educate our kids digitally. You know, a snow day should be a snow day. You know, when the snow comes, it shouldn't be now go on online school. You know, it shouldn't, you know, be forcing all this increase in digitalization in the education system. I mean, who am I to say that? I'm 21. I don't know how,
Yeah.
but whatever. But in terms of the school enforcing things, it does nothing. No, it doesn't do nothing. It creates this sphere of shame and pressure and judgment, which just compounds the issue, which is anyways going to come at some point, factually. So now you're just adding another layer of trauma to it, so that when it does come, now they can't speak about it, so they're not going to come to you, and now you've got, what are you doing, you know? So I just think it's very unhelpful.
Got you. Okay, so let's go back to the original question I was asking. In terms of, in your own self, you were able to help yourself by, I think the word you used, by finding something that was stronger than the pornography, right? That was more compelling.
Yeah.
Than...
And it also required, like you said, healing past traumas and really tapping into who I really was. But that's ultimately what it was. And then to reframe my entire life in a manner that, like, now, moment to moment, day to day, I knew what I was working towards. And I didn't have that free time, that ambiguous mind to just wander off into the dark dungeon.
Right, your life mattered.
Right.
Okay. So now my question is that that thought, was that helpful in your work with others for themselves?
Absolutely.
And in what way?
I have a question which I've developed, okay, which I share with people so that they can get into that mentality. Okay, the idea is that if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, you're fated to repeat the past. Okay, and also that you can tell someone that your future self is not addicted. So that means that if you step into your future self in the present moment, you're not addicted. You're not addicted. That's a long past chain reaction. Past doesn't exist. It's not a big sack you're dragging around with you.
Right.
So I have a question that I ask people, and I get them to do this work, and then their life becomes something worth living again. It's not an aimless groping in the dark. Every day you wake up, we're built to walk uphill. We're built to move forward, to progress. If you're not doing that, because the whole world is a fat distraction, and you're learning ridiculous things, then obviously you're going to go to this.
So what's that question?
Okay, so it goes like this. It's pretty big, but I have very practical steps on how to resolve the question. Question is, what is the greatest contribution you can conceive of giving to the world, or imagine giving to the world, using your personal passions, tools, and experiences in a manner that reduces suffering for others, gives you energy, and enough financial independence to take care of yourself and your family? Okay, that's the question. How do you answer the question? And by the way, by financial dependence, if you want to have a left and right wing to your house with a wraparound pool, it's lovely what you have outside, then you are not going to be able to make the necessary sacrifices. So moving forward, how do you answer the question? Take a piece of paper.
I didn't understand the point about the wraparound pool.
I'm saying, if in your head that is the only barometer for financial success, and you'll sacrifice
if you dream
everything
big,
else.
okay.
If you're sacrificing everything else for that, then you're not going to be able to contribute to reducing suffering for others. And you may do eventually, because you're working so well in the world, you're contributing, you're doing something good, that comes about. But if that's your first aim, you're blocking out everything else that to get you to that point, right? Of contribution, of reducing suffering, of what gives you energy, right?
Got it. Okay, so you think that in order to contribute in a certain way, it could be important for someone to
it's not
take a step back on their financial aspirations?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, then what?
I'm just saying that shouldn't be
the only thing.
The goal. The only
You're trying
goal.
to balance a few things.
You should see money as a consequence of giving value to the world. I feel like that's been my experience in the world. And thank God I've seen a lot of wealth in this world. And I've seen the people who achieved it through altruistic means and people who achieved it through purely, economic, void of any other like service in their lives. They have a $40,000 on their wrist, watch on their wrist. They're sad it's not $70,000. There's a market for every stage. Anyways, how to answer the question. You take a piece of paper, you start writing down words that trigger you when you have this thought. For me, it was like, teaching and animals and dance and therapy and, all these sorts of things. You write these words down the page. Then you draw lines to connect them. And along those lines, you write what it would take to bring those two things together. And then at some point, you have enough of an intersection on the page that that's the business model. That's where it starts. And then you build from there. Then you have to implement SMART goals: smart, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, And you just start to infuse that into every day of your life, and you plan. And everything comes alive. And then the world just starts to reorient itself around you. Like if I ask you now, where's blue in this room? Now it pops out to you, right? You weren't appreciating that before.
Right.
It's like this with life. You start to have a vision of what you want, and the world just starts to pop out at you. Aye, hamako. Boom, 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 boom. And it's magnificent. And you know what? Maybe your arrow was not in the perfect direction for you. But by stepping forward, you realize, oh, there's a door to the right. I want to go in there. People don't realize that they can do that. And because of that, they literally spend decades just walking along the conveyor belt, one thing into the next. I'm quite a self-aware person. I'm pretty driven. I came to Yeshiva University with all my visions and I heard the word finance and investment banking and I got swept up in a second and spent 3 months killing my soul to try and make it work. Because the conveyor belt is so strong and so established. So if you're not thinking of yourself, for sure, you're done.
What was the appeal there? Just because I never stumbled on that.
Investment banking?
Yeah.
Money. That's what I was saying before. I wanted to have my only barometer of success is do I have a left and right wing to my house and a wraparound pool? That's it. Money.
She's saying when you first came to YU,
that world caught me like a ton of bricks,
Right.
New
You
York,
saw that as a pathway to it.
that was all everyone spoke about. It's all that was like being shown,
Right.
And that's like it everywhere.
Interesting. Okay, so if I had to put it into a catchphrase, it's essentially purpose or mattering over the pornography, right? You have to,
If you're putting what in a word,
if I had to put what you're saying in,
is that you have to
A
have a
sentence.
force stronger in your life in a sustained long-term way that is stronger than the pull for pornography. If you don't have that, if you aren't being infused by a fire that's bigger than the fire of pornography, you are not going to overpower it.
right?
And it shouldn't
And
be
that fire is purpose mattering.
right. And
Okay.
it shouldn't be overpowering as well, by the way. People think they have to fight pornography. And, there's this nice image that I have. You don't beat darkness with a stick. You add more light, the darkness goes away on its own accord. Just start taking things on and start doing other things less. And it will happen naturally. Don't go to war because the ego is very strong. It'll win most of the time, Anyways.
It's interesting. I was thinking, you've heard of Carl Jung.
Yes.
So he was very involved in the formation of the 12 steps. And a term he coined was spiritus contra spiritum, which means spirituality to counteract the power of the spirits. So he's looking at alcohol, which is commonly referred to as spirits, which is a very powerful force and was consuming many of his patients. And he said, for certain ones, what we need is spiritus, spirituality, a spiritual transformation in order to counteract the power of the spirits. So I was thinking in terms of that, if there's a phrase that captures the essence of what you're saying. That's what I was asking.
Well, I said it before, pretty simply. You cannot take something away from someone without replacing it with something greater.
And you've seen this work with teenagers, meaning introducing these
teenagers,
concepts
young
and
adults. The people who I've worked with are mainly between the ages of I ran lots of children's camps and things as well, but in this area, talking about 13 until about 24. That's the period that I feel confident to go and speak to adults, but I've seen a lot of backlash from adults, in their 40s, 50s, 60s. They first of all look at me as who's this 21-year-old showing up, telling us what's good and not good for us. And second of all, they have all this, baggage and years of repeated habits. I'd much rather go straight to the youth, the teens that are already waiting for it and need it now than have to deal with all of that at the same time. I'm open to it. I'm happy to speak to anyone, wherever. And forget me, Guard Your Eyes as an organization supports people of all age groups and all demographics. So that's where I choose to give my focus and attention to.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your relationship with Guard Your Eyes, what they do, and I guess where it's going. And then I want to talk more about how you direct that message to the 18, 24-year-olds, what you say exactly. So let's talk about Guard Your Eyes, because you and I spoke, I think the first time we spoke was maybe a year and a half ago. And I know I wanted to have you on your on the podcast. I knew that it was important for me. I wanted to know more. And by extension, I think the people who are curious about the things I'm curious would want to know more about the differences between pornography as it relates to 40-year-olds like myself, late 30s, 40s, that demographic.
Right.
And then what the youth are dealing with now, because like we said, it's a completely different animal.
Right. Okay, so Guard Your Eyes. Best organization on the planet. So people mistake them for a filter organization. You know, they're another tag or whatever it is. They are not a filter organization. Okay, so there's many elements to their site and their organization. On the front end, you have loads of very comprehensive tools. That ranges from just digital tools to 12-step groups to hotline calls, online or in person, anonymous consultations, all for free. Okay, they have best models and methods and techniques that you can implement into your daily lives, short term, mid term, long term. The bulk of their work is centered around these 3 pillars, right? So the first one is motivation, the second one is planning, and the third one is connection. So the motivation is all about reframing one's mentality. It's all about understanding who we could be. It's all about tapping into that drive of the addiction itself and flipping it into your wave of motivation moving forward. Step 1, and they have loads of comprehensive tools for that. Step 2 is planning, and through this stage, it goes through, again, very, very thorough methodology of how to integrate this into one's daily life, to long-term strategies in ways that work. This is proven successful. They've helped, I believe, over 100,000 people. They work in 4 languages, from the Yiddish-speaking super Haredi to even secular people. They used to be partners with the biggest organization in even the non-Jewish world called Fight the New Drug. They used to be partners with them, and they have an element to their website called Fortify, which is based on their partnership. But at some point, they changed their messaging to don't make porn, make love. And as a Jewish organization, we couldn't hold that messaging,
I didn't realize that Fight the New Drug had a
partnership with Guard Your Eyes.
Partnership with Guard Your Eyes. Interesting.
Yes, and they have shared resources and shared knowledge.
Yeah, I've done a number of things with Fight the New Drug.
So yeah. Anyways, all this phenomenal work that Guard Your Eyes is doing, and it's run so efficiently, and the anonymity of it and the transparency of it. You have all these chat rooms, and you have these groups for spouses, and you have every angle of support that you can need, every method of education, and it's all free. It's right there. Now, until now, they've been serving predominantly the Haredi and Shivish world.
It's guardyoureyes.org.com.
Yeah, guardyoureyes.org, I think.
Okay. You should
guardyoureyes.org.
Yeah.
And so they've been focusing on the Haredi.
I just want to make sure that if someone's listening, they know exactly where to go to get.
Just search up Guard Your Eyes.
Yeah,
it's right there, top of the page, and yeah, it's just been a really phenomenal experience to get to know them, to work with them. I've personally found their tools very, very powerful. It's not a preventative organization, although they have lots of preventative measures, but it's an intervention-based organization. They will come into you in the heart of the addiction, be that pornography, masturbation, or full-blown sex addiction, in all the different ways that manifests. And they're the only ones doing it.
Right. There's certainly no one who's done as much as Guard Your Eyes.
They have the scumwork, they have the science, they have the marketing. They exist.
In the ultra-Orthodox world, already
all the way to secular world. And
that what?
Pardon? I'm saying that they predominantly be focusing in the ultra-Orthodox and
right, I'm saying the message. There's no one that's done more than Guard Your Eyes to tackle this problem.
Certain. But they have the vessel, they have the platform to hold millions or more people from every demographic, is what I'm saying.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Got you. So as part of, obviously you started at 16 years old, right?
Right.
Working on your own life and also helping friends as well. As part of your joining the organization, the intent is to bring what they're doing out to a much wider demographic.
Exactly. To the modern Orthodox and secular world, and especially to the youth. People my age. I've been speaking in lots of schools so far. It's just starting, but we're going to roll out and just keep surfing that wave. Schools, shuls, camps. My intention is to go, globally, but let's just go through the states. By region, identify every school, every shul, every camp, every institution, everything, and just get in there and start providing our programming. It's needed, and everyone knows it's needed. I can't begin to tell you the receptivity. I message or email school. It's not send us your details and let us get back to you in a month, and we're not sure because it's just yes. When can you come? That's what I'm experiencing. Doesn't matter. Yes, when can you come? I just tell them I work for Guard Your Eyes. They don't even check the credentials because they just know how important and significant this is. The school knows. So that's what I've been doing, and it's been great.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people know the name Guard Your Eyes.
Yeah.
Definitely. I've always associated with more on the more from side.
Right.
So I'm glad that in terms of the tools are applicable
Universal.
across. Right.
And
it's
their
universal.
language is ever expanding. And, you can have different language for different people.
I did want to highlight one thing you said, support groups for partners of people who are abused, because that's important.
They have that too, yes.
Not for partners of people who are addicted, because that's super complex. Laura Boschkin and I did a podcast specifically for that purpose, was that I was receiving a number of phone calls from spouses
Right.
of those getting into recovery or beginning to address the problem. And it shakes the world of a spouse, because oftentimes they know there's something wrong, but either they don't know what's happening or they don't know the extent. And as soon as the partner starts healing, one of the things that they're told is honesty is going to heal you. Right?
Yeah.
The truth will set you free.
Yeah.
And that honesty becomes a bomb on the partner's
Right.
world. So Guard Your Eyes offers a support group.
Exactly. On our
spouses.
statistics, over like 4/5 of the people who are signed up on the website are married. They're not single young people. 4/5 of them are married people who are in terms of compulsive pornography or sexual addictions.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you make of that statistic?
Well, primarily they haven't been able to access the teen world, but the statistic doesn't shock me. Meaning, the statistic just shows that this is very prevalent in married couples, and that I think in my generation there is this belief that once you get married, these things go away.
Yes.
Not at all.
Not at all.
In fact, they get far worse as a product of what you did before you were married. Right? So now you're married, and like I said before, you've been having this self-soothing, always accessible, guaranteed source of release without the presence of another for years and years on end. Your brain has taken that screenshot of all those core chemicals so many times that it has biologically fallen in love with itself. Right? So that screenshot of hand, phone, and bathroom is now your unconscious vision of what it means to have intimacy. So now you get to marriage, and now you've got to do hard work. You've got to refine yourself. You've got stresses. You've got bills to pay. You've got all the other conditions of marriage, which are not that. Your brain screams at you, why are we doing this? I know a far easier way. And that's what happens.
And then there's also the shame and secrecy that compounds itself in marriage, where that was my story.
Right.
Although it wasn't marriage, it was a relationship.
Right.
I got into a relationship, and all of a sudden these behaviors that I was able to accept about myself, say, okay, I tried a couple times to stop, but it's not so bad. How damaging are these things? I'll stop as soon as I'm in a relationship.
No.
And as soon as that lie was exposed, two things happened. A, I had to deal with the reality of what I was, okay, I have this problem that I actually can't stop, number one. And number two, now I have these lies and secrets from my partner.
Yeah.
And that's very, those two actually add fuel to the fire. They don't.
Yeah.
They don't take it out.
On this point of shame, etc., I didn't touch on the third pillar of Guard Your Eyes, which is connection, which is we have to stop seeing this as something that we have to overcome. You cannot overcome this without the support of someone external to yourself. An addict has to see themselves as overrun by an algorithm which requires someone to come from the outside and pull the plug almost and enter into the hardwiring system. So this connection page, which they have, which has all these different groups and forums, is precisely that. These accountability partners, which you need. And people like to say, well, that will just be my spouse. But often the spouse is the furthest thing that's keeping them from getting accountability, because that's they're putting space between them and the outside world.
Also, I can tell you from my experience with the spouse, it's the worst idea in the world. You don't. First of all, it's mean. It's cruel.
Yeah.
It's cruel to make your accountability
exactly.
partner
Exactly.
the person who's that affected by everything you do. If you call someone who's a friend of yours and you say, hey, I'm triggered today, right? I'm stressed at work, or I saw a picture, or there's whatever, some thoughts coming into my head, they can move on with their day after their conversation.
Exactly. One of the visions
your wife can't.
One of the visions that I have is that I'm going to go around to every boy and girl that I can, get involved in this program across the Jewish world. And by the age of 15, 16, maybe 17, you create them an accountability partner, okay? A friend, a close friend that becomes their accountability partner, a chavruta, simply on this. Now they walk with that person through the rest of their life. So 15 years down the line, they're now in marriage. And after years and years of all the different complications, they have someone who's evolved with them. They can go to speak about these things, rather than 15 years worth of compounding just so much trauma and baggage, you wouldn't even know where to start. You can't go to a therapist and unpack it. First, it's going to cost you like all your savings. And secondly, it's just going to take forever to get down to the root. But then you have this friend who was there since he was 17. You evolved together. I want to have millions of these partnerships. Cost nothing. And you just have to like create the idea and boom.
Right. One of the softwares that I like in this space, I've spoken with them a little bit, is Covenant Eyes. You know Covenant Eyes?
I do know them, yeah.
But one of the things I like about that is that they use technology and that partnership together. So they have, I forget the term they use for it, but there's someone who's getting the reports of your phone usage.
You know Web Cover?
It works the same way?
It takes random screenshots throughout the day of your phone.
Yes, same with Covenant Eyes. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I have to tell you, after the rabbis that I've worked with, I just recently worked with a few rabbis now at NCSY. I'm an advisor. And they told me that they have this with a lot of the people in their kihila. But then all day long, they're just receiving screenshots of blurred out pornography. It's not working. So I like the idea of it. And I think that it would work for me personally if I chose the right individual who I really respected. It would have an impact through that one device, let alone everything else in my life. But I can say also that I've spoken to plenty of rabbis that are just receiving all day long screenshots of pornography.
And it doesn't.
Like it worked for the first 4 months. Then the guy fell, and the rabbi said to him, "It's okay, I believe in you, keep going." So then he fell 3 or 4 more times, and then he's just like, "Okay, the rabbi's seeing it, whatever it is, what it is."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe the rabbis need the tools to be able to...
They do. They're asking me, and they're asking the organization, "Come speak in our shuls, send us your content. We don't know what we're dealing with here, right? Like, because this is new. It's a phenomenon."
Okay, so let's... If you had a microphone that can speak to every 18 or 24-year-old in the world, what is the message you want to deliver to them?
Primarily, I want them to realize the beautiful, beautiful life that they could be living right now. Right now. They don't have to go do this crazy work and achieve a whole, list of, artificial, mundane, status, whatever's. They could be living a magnificent life right now where they really command their reality. They really are contributing force in this world. They live in intimacy with every step that they walk. And just to be on earth in 2025 is an immense, immense, immense treasure if you use it for what it is. And just how short you're selling yourself. How short you're selling yourself when you succumb to these addictions. And the fact that you succumb to this addiction is not your fault. It's not your fault. You're entering into the world, the throwness of life. You wake up on a ship. Where am I come from? Where am I going to? Where am I? That was you. And you were overrun by one of the biggest industries in the world. $200 billion of revenue a year, 25% of internet research, best marketing, neuroscience, everything. It's not your fault. You were going to fall, and our parents did not have the resources to help us. It's not our fault. But the support, the help exists. It is your responsibility to take that support and that help. Don't think you can do it by yourself. You can't. But not only will you overcome this, the very, very addiction and that cave of darkness will become the vessel to fulfill light. I have these analogies of these two caves, 5 foot deep, 50 foot deep. Which cave is darker? 50 foot deep. Which one's also a vessel potentially for more light? 50 foot deep. The very traumas and struggles will become the mechanism through which you bring about your most true, authentic, deep, intimate life. We should look at these things as the best things that ever happened to us. Thank you, porn. Thank you, porn.
Thank you for
taking me to the depths of the earth so that I could have this huge vessel to receive what it means to actually be here, and that I could fill that up with light potentially. I saw with your podcast with Rab Waiwai a few years ago. He said a line. He said, for the layman, spirituality is a luxury, but for the addict, it's a necessity, right? And that
Chase Taub says this.
Pardon?
Chase Taub.
That was Chase Taub?
Yeah.
I thought I saw that with Rab.
It could be it was brought up in that one, yeah.
Regardless.
But I want to make sure to credit.
But that's MS, that's truth.
Yes.
And that's been my experience and the experience of the people that I've worked with. That in the words of a mentor of mine, Rav Yaakov Klein, these desires are holy energies in disguise. They are not meant to be squashed and removed, but rather reinterpreted, transformed, and elevated.
So,
this is the best thing that ever happened to you.
So you know what I think the theme of this is? Because there's a there's the negative side of this, like we said, right? Which is so many people get trapped in it, and there's the positive side that it forces it forces us to elevate our game.
Yeah.
Right? We really have to step into purpose. We have to step into meaning. Really have to step into this belief of I matter.
Yeah.
And otherwise, we can really fall off the deep end. So connecting to what you just said is there is no layman anymore.
No.
In this world, there is no layman. So you said for the layman, spirituality is a
Luxury.
is a luxury.
For the addict, it's a
Right.
necessity.
In this world, with the amount of distractions we have with pornography, there is no layman.
Yeah.
Spirituality is a necessity for
The
all of
layman
us.
back in the day was the farmer who just lived a life of rural bliss or hard work, but it was authentic. You know, you milked the cow, you got rid of the muck, you tended to the trees, you know, you did your thing. You didn't have a crazy, complex spiritual life, but at least you were completely woven into being. Today's day and age, it's just zombie, zombie. Here's a way to be a zombie, and here's another way to be a zombie. All day long, artificial things in our face. Like I walk through New York, and I just think, 300 years ago, or whatever it was, this place was just grass. There's nothing here. And now you walk through, like, just like, it's crack. It's just crack everywhere, you know? Literally what it is. And I listen to people, and just look at people, and they're just making noise. They're just saying, I exist, I exist, I exist, like animals at a waterhole. And I'm saying it from a place of compassion, because that's not who they are. That's not who we are. We are literal angels walking on earth. We are. Like, you know what I'm talking about here. Like, we have a physical vessel, we are spiritual beings, and we get to use this place as a bridge to bring the infinite potential into reality. Every building you saw was once a thought in someone's head. Every country and state was once an idea. People brought these things into the world. Like, we're still here after thousands of years. That's just insane. That's what it means to be alive. And today's day and age, it's just about how can we distract you? We take your money and remove your attention, remove your consciousness, so you just serve. And I'm not this conspiracy theorist, and I don't have the energy. I don't care about it. It's just what's happening. I don't need some higher order, some secret group to be out there control. And just that's what's happening. Maybe by mistake, but it's what's happening.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Yes. I'm glad you're doing this. I'm glad you're doing this work. I'm glad there's some people starting at a young age. It would have been very helpful for me to have that myself. I think, offline you were mentioning that sometimes after speeches, people come and say things to you and say, I'm telling you this for the first time.
Yeah.
Right. This is the first time and essentially what they're doing is unloading something that they've been carrying, a very heavy weight that they've been carrying.
Yeah.
For, you're speaking with younger people, so maybe it can only be 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. If you go into other circles, it can be 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
People are carrying a weight. And I think I'd have to say that that's the currency that I trade in. The currency that I trade in is those acknowledgments that something I said has enabled someone to feel safe enough to say, okay, I can unload
Big time.
this. This is your experience as well.
Absolutely. It's not the only currency I trade in, but it's one of the most affirming for sure. Yeah, I agree with you.
Is that?
Yeah, they come and you just think, wow, this traumatized soul. It's about to share something with me for the first time. It never said it to anyone in 10 years, and yet it defines every second of their life. You know?
Right. This is why I think some of these problems are, they're not real problems, meaning they can feel massive, right? In terms of the undertaking of like, how am I going to combat pornography? How am I going to combat these massive industries of, you say, money and attention, intention.
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
Okay, we're going to ensnare this
marketing,
person.
social media, it's all a funnel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And on the other end of it is there's one lie that's planted into almost every person who's struggling in this way, and that's you're alone in your struggle. And if that lie can be burst, the whole game changes.
Exactly.
It changes. And I think that's when someone is walking over to you afterwards and they're saying, Saadiah, I've never said this to anyone in my life. And oftentimes I've experienced this with things unrelated to what I spoke about. Wasn't necessarily, I can be talking about pornography or abuse, but someone can come to me and share, I haven't had sex in my marriage in 5 years.
Right.
It could feel unrelated, but that's the burden that they're carrying. And just being able to let that go, how much it shifts their life. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but it's certainly a message for schools, for leaders. It is very, very unfortunate that you can walk into a school where there's teachers and guidance counselors and sometimes even therapists. And somehow you speaking can be the first time they felt that level of safety.
It's tragic, and in yeshiva, I ran these groups, 30 or so, 30, 40 boys every single week, once or twice a week. We did group meditations together and we spoke together, and people were revealing things for the first time. They were crying and shaking, and it was just like, oh my goodness me, like people are carrying so much with them for years and years on end. And I'm so grateful that I got them when they were 20 or 18. Imagine if they were 38 or 58, what that must be doing to their reactions, to their family, to their world, to their jobs, to their everything. It's just, people are suffering, people are suffering. And all it takes is just a bit of compassion. I'm not an expert. Like, I haven't got a psychology degree. I haven't, I've got a lot of empirical experience, okay? But I've watched people's shoulders sink 3 inches for the first time in their lives just by being shown a little bit of compassion, a little bit of love. Yes. And I get up, then I share my story and my experiences, and people say, wow, people are just willing to share now. And Guard Your Eyes, they have all these platforms, these forums that people go in, anonymous chats, they can just pour out their soul because everyone's just there, like, sharing their stories,
So what do you think it is that gives people the level of comfort to come to you afterwards and say...
To me personally?
Yes.
I don't want to, speak in ambiguous terms, but through my life experiences, through the development of my language and my I guess demeanor, whatever you want to call it, I think I create an inviting space for people. When I get up in front of them, I show them vulnerability. I am of their age, I'm of their experiences. I make minimum boundaries between me and the people that I'm speaking to. I'd much prefer to get up at a school, pull my chair into the middle, say everyone crowd around in a circle, let's speak like this, then me stand behind the stage. I can cry, very easily in front of people. We do these meditations and we just get very, very, like, real with it. Other than that, all I can tell you is that it's happening. I can't tell you what it is precisely, right, but I see it's happening. I see it's real, so I'm just carrying on going,
Yeah, what I've found, I think the ingredient is sharing one's own story, honestly. I think that's the ingredient. And then people say, oh, like, we can do that. Yeah. We can do that here. He can speak. He didn't disappear. I can speak too. Also, vulnerability is something that's quite interesting. I've heard it said that we hate seeing it on ourselves, but we love seeing it in others.
Right.
And when we see that in someone else, and our feeling is never judgment, it's always compassion, understanding, and more importantly, actually a level of intimacy and closeness. So someone shares a thing that we were so sure if we shared it would drive us further apart.
Yeah.
And it does the exact opposite, and it invites people somehow to go further. Earlier we spoke about the spiral.
Yeah.
So I've seen this at a Dhamma. This happens quite often, where on some level everyone's already in a space of honesty, right?
Right.
They're saying, I'm here to get help.
Right.
Right. So just by walking in the door, you've acknowledged my life isn't perfect and I want help from someone. You're asking for help.
I love for making these spaces.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But then there's a level that it goes even deeper. And I see it every single time where someone chooses to take that plunge, for whatever reason, and just goes to, like, a different level of honesty and vulnerability. I'm thinking of one, as we're speaking, where there's one guy who, we often do a ceremony right, like, going into Shabbos.
Got it.
So we'll start with something, and then we'll do candle lighting, and then sometimes we'll go into davening for Shabbos, sometimes something else, but always be right at that time for Shabbos. It's a very special moment because everyone's, putting their energetically in the world there is, and practically we're all, even if not everyone is Shomer Shabbos, but we're all kind of disconnecting in a different level. It's the weekend, it's Shabbos, and in that moment, often, not every retreat, I would say something magical happens as Shabbos is entering. And in this guy went into a little bit of a panic attack. And he said, I have to leave. So we said, okay, what's coming up? Like, when do you have to leave? Like, what's coming up? And I don't remember exactly how he got there, but at some point he went religious. He went to rage, like absolute rage at God.
Wow.
And in our thought processes, when we think about raging at God, I think the thought is that we're doing something very profane.
Okay.
Right? We're cursing God. We're angry at God. But in reality, I think when we witness it, there's nothing more holy.
Go read some Tehillim. That's what he's doing all day long.
Right, exactly.
That's exactly what you're meant to do. Go out there and lament across the mountainside and scream, shriek, cry, everything. That's what you're meant to do. That's it. I was taking boys into the hills, and we were doing exactly that, just screaming senseless,
At God.
At God.
Right.
And when I say at God, at each other, at the floor, at the animals, at everything, because it's all him,
Yeah.
It was like, and at some point you realize that, like, when you get to that sensitive enough space, like, me and you, it's just Hashem speaking to himself. We exist within his thoughts, and that's not an ambiguous term. If you just learn about metaphysics, how this world is actually physically working. It's so crazy that it's like me and you and these separate objects, because, yeah, it's a reality, but it's that level of reality. And there's the waves on the ocean surface, and there's the still water, which is where this conversation is being processed, and where like all the work is being done. And just that's my message. Just come with me and come with these people and just tap into that space. Come to Adama. Just see what could be. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I have this letter that I told you I want to share.
Oh, please. Please.
I saw this beautiful tool that you use about the thank you letter for pornography when you say goodbye.
Yeah.
When I wrote this, it was not the last time that I watched pornography, I thought it was, and then it wasn't. But one thing I can tell you is that when I wrote it, I gave a lot of compassion to every single age of me beforehand. I spoke to them all. And every time that I felt afterwards, which was not many times, it was an isolated incident. It was not attached to this whole long thread of years of addiction. It was.
I felt like you severed something in this moment of writing the letter.
It wasn't sever. It was a hug. Which just a hug. It was like more like a hug, and that hug was everlasting, right? Because it came from a deep place. Anyways, share that with you right now. Yeah, just one of the tools. Okay, cool.
Just one of the
tools. Tools.
Tools. Tools. Yes.
Tools. How do you guys say it here?
Just before you go in, is it? It's exactly how you said it. It's my American ears that have trouble hearing English. This tool you stumbled across through your own
no, it was
work,
through
or
you.
you heard it from?
I heard it from you, and I've been using it ever since, helping other people. I have these different thorough programs that I help people through with all the different short-term, mid-term, long-term tools, and this is part of it. One of them,
Yeah, beautiful.
Cool. Dear Porn, thank you. Thank you for the years of mining and hollowing out my soul, ultimately to make space and a burning sense of necessity for spirituality and intimacy. You certainly ended childhood early, but were the catalyst for a deeply rewarding early maturation. Through your corrosive force, I heard my calling, to be an active warrior in this war for consciousness, fighting for the essence of existence, and to cherish sensitivity by nurturing the sublime inherent within me. Thank you for installing within me the power of visualization. I'm learning to harness this gift to conjure up internal palaces for divinity, manifest my future, walk with my ancestors, and see through materiality so I can access and address the one, the Rabbanu Shalom, behind it all. Thank you for breaking all boundaries and flattening all social constructs. I'm now able to build freely, and each stone can claim authenticity and integrity. Thank you for dehumanizing men and women alongside the beauty of physicality.
Thank you for
dehumanizing.
Okay.
Men and women alongside the beauty of physicality. A pathway back has revealed how I walk among pristine angels, clothed within a dimension of matter. That these angels, myself being one, were granted the most profound condition, that we can reach out across our internal universes to hear the song and partake in the dance of each other's spirits through a wondrous medium called senses and the motions that accompany them, with millions of iterations in between, all to enhance the same cause of returning to source. The illusion of separation you were searing into my soul was in truth the precursor for connection, for the greater the split, the greater the reunion. Most of all, thank you for highlighting the fallacy that power and pleasure and all other fake children of fulfillment lie in the endless access to more. Rather, and in line with our precious tradition, it's constriction that brings expansion, knowing how to hold back until the specific moment that inflames intimacy, and through separation, being kodesh lachol, secular and holy, that we refine intention and achieve cosmic satiation. Herein lies the seat of my consciousness, to discern between revelation and concealment, and elevate everything. Eitz Chaim Hi, an ever-growing tree of life available for those who nurture it. Each day, the passionate charge inside me expands to eventually channel this fire into laser form down the singular but all-encompassing space of Abayit Ne'eman B'Yisrael, my radiant home, and the women and children within it. I cannot wait. Thank you, Porn, for freedom. Saadiah Daniel.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Daniel's an interesting name as it relates to your journey, you know?
Yeah.
The lion's den,
Yeah.
so to speak. There are a few places go with it. First, I would say that the first thing that struck me is that your the message that I was getting from you before you said that was very much in line with that. So there's a congruence, a consistency, which is that
Thank you.
there's deep spirituality that's being forced almost upon you and then upon all of us by extension, certainly the youth of today, that there's no choice, right? There's almost no choice. You have, like, you're either going to end up with dirt or gold. Like, there's no in between. You can't have a half-assed life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's something beautiful in that. There's something enriching. It's scary, but it's holy at the same time. Second, if you can pull it out, the word sensitivity.
Yeah.
Can you just... I was thinking about where you're saying, but then I wanted to make sure to stay with to listen to the rest and not get lost.
You want to look at yourself?
Yeah. So towards the beginning, you mentioned the word sensitivity. You said to be an active warrior. He says, through your corrosive force, I heard my calling. To be an active warrior in this war for consciousness, fighting for the essence of existence. And here was a point. And to cherish sensitivity by nurturing the sublime inherent within.
Yeah.
So that term, to cherish sensitivity, I think it's one of the great lies around pornography and also around our sexuality and around the world in general. That sensitivity, there's nothing. I've often wondered if God has every experience that we have, right? You say God has anger. Okay, and I've concluded that it's possible. I'm not sure. It's possible there's one experience that he doesn't know.
Go on.
That we have.
I like this.
Numbness.
Okay, I see what you did there. That's great.
Right. There's something about being desensitized that just doesn't feel, it feels like, when I thought of this idea, that it's like, for God to be numb, like, what does that mean? Like, what would that mean? It's like, it almost feels like the exact opposite of godliness.
Right.
To live in any way, the essence of...
That's how we were created. Like, I really believe that people can be stimulated to the highest form of climax at the edge of their fingertips.
Or nothing.
Or nothing.
Yeah.
Right. Breath.
So there's energetic orgasms. There's a whole world around...
and that's not some far-fetched thing. You could have that very quickly if you just learn to really refine yourself.
I felt like as a teenager, the kind of like a messaging amongst friends or a young adult was, it's cooler to be somewhat desensitized sexually. Like if a guy got turned on too quickly, or, you know, or even like the idea that someone maybe orgasmed too quickly, like this whole idea, the suggestion that they're, or let's say looking at someone, right? Like that idea, like they can walk around naked, but if we look, then it's too big a deal.
I'm not following.
I had a friend who was shamed, maybe this I'll give it graphically. I had a friend who was shamed very heavily as a teenager because he was making out with a girl, and during it he climaxed.
Okay.
And he shared it with a friend who, for whatever reason, shared it with others, and he was shamed mercilessly about this idea. And there's something about it that's beautiful in there, right? There's such extreme sensitivity to touch. There's something like looking back as an adult at that same story, right? The fact that we made fun of a 16, 17-year-old kid for this is insane. Because as an adult, I'm almost like, I'm desperate for that sensitivity to it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if that's the sensitivity was when, you know, he made out with this girl, imagine if he'd preserved that sensitivity just a little bit longer, you know? to maybe later relationships or to marriage. Like, I mean, in one lens, through this particular lens, I understand what, Ghazal was trying to do by trying to make us like protect ourselves until it's like, that's electric, and look what happens if you don't do that. Like you're
Right.
right, very quick degradation of senses.
Yes. Yes. I think that as with pornography, one of the benefits of getting rid of pornography, or one of the damaging things that happens, is we become increasingly desensitized. So we need more and more graphic imagery, the type of content we're watching, or sometimes you have porn-induced erectile dysfunction.
So I want to speak about that actually.
Yeah, where people can't even, in a relationship with an actual person, they can't have an erection because of the fact that porn has desensitized them so much. So when you spoke about that, to cherish sensitivity, I was thinking how important it is, not only how it's a sign of health, it's a sign of godliness. That's why I said that God doesn't experience numbness, if I can.
I like that.
Say, if I can be so bold as to describe something. And the last point is that it extends beyond. It extends beyond sexuality. That actually sensitivity is a sign of health, not the opposite.
Of what it really means to be human.
Yes.
Essentially, we have such sensitive vessels. Like, we put so much rubbish in our body, and our clothes, whatever. I'm not getting into that whole figure right now, but yes, the answer is yes. Just because you mentioned it, I want to speak about that erectile dysfunction thing, which is that what you have today, for the first time, again, because of the generation divide, is you have from boys, let's say, who have been watching pornography since they were, young teenagers. So they've become what's called a voyeur, which is that they have learned that sexual intimacy is experienced by observing two other people. They are here in their own confines, and that's the scenario. What happens? So now it's the first night of their marriage. They've never actually had sex before, and the first night it's meant to be this arena of magical intimacy, and they've got erectile dysfunction because they've never had that experience of being in the presence of another. Their brain's addicted to pixels on a screen, not a real situation.
Right. And
that's how marriages are starting. Like, imagine that being the start to your marriage. Like, that is trauma beyond trauma. So the girl's, let's call it, the girl in this scenario is, freaking out. He's freaking out. He's not going to say, oh yeah, it's because I've got a porn addiction. He may not even know that's what the situation is. And that's how it starts. Shabbat brachas the next day. Like, I'm hearing about this more and more from the rabbis I'm working with. And it's only happening now because, like I said, the neuroplasticity on teenagers has such a profound impact. With adults, it's less so. It can still happen with such, pervasive use, but this is becoming frequent, and I just want to save these marriages. Like, the biggest line of what I'm trying to do here and what God is trying to do here is build as many flourishing homes as we can. Beautiful homes. And
porn is definitely the enemy of that.
Cancer's got to go.
Yeah, porn is definitely the enemy of that. But like you said, it's beautiful how it could be converted. The energy can be converted as a catalyst for so much more.
If it's not converted, it will eat you.
Yes.
You can't come into something else in your life. You're going to take this drive, this darkness, and you're going to flip it.
So multiple times you use the word addiction, addict.
Right.
Do you make a distinction between those who are addicted to porn, those who use it casually?
So I have never met teenagers who use porn casually. When I say casually, I mean like once every month or two. I've never seen that before. Meaning, if you are a 12 or 13 or 14, 15-year-old, this is what you're exposed to. I just took you through the chemical reactions that are occurring in your brain. They're so much more exaggerated than pretty much any other source of pleasure or mood regulation in your entire life. If you look at brain scans of porn versus heroin, I'm not even going to get into that, but this is an addiction from the get-go, Like, again, adults have a different brain. But for kids, I don't know anything called casual porn user, right? When do I qualify it as an addiction? We're talking about pornography right now. There's masturbation addiction, there's sex addiction. The second that a person notices it interfering with their lives in a way that, their attention spans, their frustration levels, their inability to go without it for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 days, or whatever it is, their constant visualization and the way they just completely starts to warp their life. I mean, But to put it simply, I don't know teenagers who are exposed to it and that are not addicted.
Okay, so when you assume that someone's using, they're addicted.
Yeah, adults,
Yeah.
I can have a different conversation about, but yeah.
Right, because I know with Guard Your Eyes, I don't know if this is still the case, but it used to be where when someone first went to them, they made a distinction between.
They still have that.
They
They
still
still
do
have
have
that. And it is true because you have a, if I'm, just having a masturbation addiction once or twice or whatever it is, 3 or 4 times a week, versus if I'm, paying for prostitutes whilst I'm married, 2 or 3, there is obviously a spectrum,
Right.
to addiction itself. How
Okay, I would
detrimental-
classify both of those as addiction, but
You wouldn't.
I would.
Right.
With that
They are.
kind of frequency.
They are. They're just different levels of detriment, needing
Right.
different preventative measures, intervention measures.
Okay, so now that you're mentioning this, I've actually met a different class of people. I've spoken about it a few times here where they're not guys who struggle with pornography regularly, but they've stumbled on it a couple of times, or maybe
Okay.
they will make it a point once in a while to seek out
Right.
a Netflix video with a rated R scene and
Okay.
whatever else, right? But then the guilt and shame that they'll feel afterwards is so extreme that they'll live in that for several months. So even if they're not watching pornography regularly, the one scene carries an effect.
So that's,
several months.
for me, that's crazy.
Have you encountered this?
No, because like I said, teenagers watching hardcore pornography daily, speak about it at lunchtime. Like, R-rated scene. Do you know what like teens are watching these days? Like on Netflix, what we can see at like 13, 14 years old, what we're watching, what our shows show us. Our shows like encourage cheating, encourage, all sorts of perversion, encourage like we watch these movies and we can't wait to see something which shows us some form of sexual perversion. Like real, real TV, fake. It's just no. Like what you just mentioned right there is a phenomenon from the generation or two above us. Like that's not a reality.
Right.
Maybe in some very, very, very isolated Measure communities, a kid my age, but that's not what we're dealing with anymore.
Okay, you don't feel like that's a reality
No, not
today.
at all.
I mean, there is one person that's coming to mind, probably at this point, mid-20s, but I spoke to him when he was real young, who first he was very much into pornography, and he made a conscious effort to get out of it. And every couple of months, he'd stumble, and it would wreck his world
Pornography,
completely.
or you're talking about R-rated movies.
No, every couple of months, he'd watch pornography.
So pornography, I get.
Yeah,
Talking
yeah.
about like R-rated.
No, but I'm saying it would wreck his world completely. And what I would tell him was, like, dude, this is amazing. Like, you're at 20 years old, you're tackling this problem, you're having major success.
Yeah.
And if you set the bar as perfection, I mean, you're screwed. You shouldn't have come down into human form.
Yeah, exactly. Stay as an angel, mate.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Yeah, I agree with you. I completely agree with you. And it just comes back to this idea that, like, the spiritual idea that like this world was created through Shriya Kalim, that the prerequisite for, unification with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a state of brokenness. That is why we are here, because the most intimate relationship is one of brokenness coming back to completion. If you don't have that, then like it may have all just stayed white light.
Right.
And it is white light, just lay it up,
How do you think this, reflects on or tells a story about the state of Orthodox Judaism? The fact that you can go into yeshiva and the leaders will tell you that 100% of people deal with this, right? That you can just walk into a room and it's like, hey, this is what's going on. Pornography and OnlyFans. And,
Yeah.
right. And as I can tell you, as people get older and married, like you said, it doesn't stop.
It gets worse even.
It gets worse, and then sometimes one spouse is able to drag another spouse into their into their mess.
So ask the question more clearly.
Do you feel like this is a standalone problem, right? Pornography that exists, and we have to deal with pornography, or is it reflective of a problem within Orthodox Judaism, that something can get this deep, that a problem, that you use the word cancer, that a cancer can penetrate this deeply into Orthodox Judaism? Is that reflective of our overall defenses? So that there's something we're missing.
So this issue does not discriminate to modern Orthodox Judaism or Orthodox Judaism. This is a global shared issue around the world, with all of its different stratas of like shame, or it exists everywhere, in every religious community, in every secular community, to different degrees, but everywhere.
But
Okay?
isn't that the purpose of Orthodox Judaism? Is that certain things discriminate?
Say more.
Aren't we trying to build a life where some problems don't get in? Isn't that the purpose?
Right. So that is one way of looking at it, as a way to avoid some problems getting in. The way I prefer to look at it is a way to build a ladder to get above the problems.
But you can have the same thing.
Well, depending on how well you build the ladder. So I would say that our institutions
I mean, the net effect is going to be the same, whichever way you want to
No,
approach
our
it.
institutions are definitely failing to be competitive enough and evolved enough and respond quickly enough. I don't blame them. This has come very quickly. But what I would blame them for, as I sometimes experience, is if they right now turn a blind eye on us. They don't listen to our call. And they stay stuck in their old, I don't know, post-Holocaust PTSD ways or whatever it is, you know? That would be not just a tragedy, that would be a crime, you know? Because people are suffering now. And there is definitely that level of, especially the more right you go, you know, the more attachment there is to like, you know, silence, and, you know, we only speak the way of Torah. We don't let us. Okay. Like I said, like, this problem is so big that it's going to surface at some point in a way that cannot be shunned anymore. It could take 15 more years. It's not going to take. It's going to take maybe 5 more years at most before they're literally screaming, "Please come help us!" You know, like, because it's just what's happening is just too detrimental. Is orthodoxy, the modern American? You guys have so many terms. Is orthodoxy failing? Is it? I mean, clearly the status quo is not great, and just by being in America, I'm traveling around. I'm seeing so many different like things going on, and I can see that, like, you know, there has to be a far more cohesive, compassionate, proactive, building approach rather than trying to, like, you know, like, hide things to the side, ignore, just bring more Torah into the scene. Rabbi gets up and he will speak for an hour about Inyane Kedusha and not say the word porn once. But then these kids are going home and watching hardcore pornography for an hour. What do you think is going to happen? Yeah. It's a shame, but it's changing, and I hope to be part of that change, and I'm building a team, and it's going to happen. You're here.
Right. I guess, right, the reason I asked the question that way is because depending on how we diagnose the problem, the solution is very different. So while I understand that pornography is new, right? Even fight the new drug, right? They say it's like it's the oldest,
You're right.
like probably the oldest drug, right? The first thing, there's drawings of pornography, but this is new.
Yeah.
Like, this is a new drug in its current iteration. And like you pointed out very accurately, is when they started till today, there's a new, right? It should be fight the new drug at this point.
Yeah,
right?
Put that on recurring repeat.
Exactly. Because there's something about it that's even more extreme and more intense and more.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you just limit it to this came on the scene new, and now we not have to build defenses for it.
Not defenses. I mean, yes.
Whatever it is.
Whatever. Okay, go on.
The best offense, the best defense, good offense, however you want to say it, right? But now we have to respond to the call of the hour. I hear that, but I want to push back against it a little bit, because especially when you say that a culture of silence, right? A culture of not being able to talk about things. If I have that in any family unit, take a small family unit, and then once I say it, then just multiply it to a community, and then multiply it to society. If I take a small family unit and say, there's only certain kind of problems that can be discussed here.
Okay.
Right. So if you may have certain experiences in this home, but you're not allowed to talk about them.
Right.
You can't bring those to the surface. That itself guarantees that there's going to be problems.
I agree.
At any point in time in society, in the world, if I put this rule into a family, and I say that we only can tolerate a certain range of human experiences, but if you have certain problems, we can't accept it, then that is inviting a problem.
Yeah.
There's viruses that can get in today, and viruses that will be recreated in 10 years that will get in. At what point do we say that there's something systemic here?
It's systemic, but what I'm saying is that this issue also exists in the Muslim religious community and in the Christian religious community and the Buddhist, that issue of the culture of silence. Now, in our tradition, what do I think the real failure is? That we have the most comprehensive, beautiful way of living life, which has had the soul sucked out of it and just left the shells and vessels behind. That if that itself is just lived properly, then we would have the answers. That's the failure. The failure is not, this was going to happen. This was going to come. And throughout the generations, there's been, there was the Enlightenment, and there was, every generation has its own thing.
Right.
And what it is that in the face of these struggles, we don't then say, let's look at our resources and let's actually start using them. We just either concave or turn away, or whatever it is. If a person lives in the way that Yahudut, Judaism, was meant to be, it is such a fire and it's so beautiful. I wasn't religious for my teen years. I went and had all these crazy experiences to try and find some level. The fact that I can tie my right shoelace before my left and feel like I'm sending up a signal beyond the furthest cosmos is such a beautiful way to live my life, let alone Shabbos and all the magnificent things that happen throughout the day. Say a bracha to internalize what that means. All it takes is just education and the arena for it to happen. We have a yeshiva system today. Lots of kids are going, more could be going. It's just a perfect place for this sort of transformation to happen at whatever age. The fact that it's not on a wide scale, but it is on a little scale. You're seeing the world change. You're seeing
it's
happening. Mashiach's coming. They see the process unfolding. I just want to put a foot on the gas and say, "Yalla, we're here already. It exists. Let's just do it."
Right. It's starting to shift. I think what's important sometimes is that we have to, one thing that God seems very intent on is to distinguish between good and bad.
Okay.
And it seems very early on, a very clear, distinctions, separations, this.
Tell me about good and bad. What do you mean by that? Because I have a different understanding of it.
It can mean in a lot of different ways, but, pure and impure. These animals are kosher. These animals are not. These animals, even in going back to Noah's Ark.
Right.
Right. You're going to bring these animals in. I think certain animals were brought in twos, certain animals were brought in sevens. Right. The animals are on these floors. The humans are on those floors. Right. There's the idea of it being.
And what if you break it? Then what?
I don't know about what if you break it. That's a different.
Okay.
That's a different thing of what if you break it. But I think there are levels of it. Right. Just to get into that, there are levels to the game. But let's say it this way: is that from a very early on, the reason I brought up Noah's Ark is because it's way before the Torah was given.
Right.
Meaning it was very, even actually I go back further, Adam and Eve.
Right.
Right. And it's there's separation. Don't go here. Right. There's something, and I don't know that it's not like a law. That's not the point I'm making. It's just how important it is to have distinctions.
100%.
Right. So maybe the word good or bad threw you off. I'm saying something different. I'm saying the idea of distinctions. It's not like animals are good and humans are bad or vice versa. It's just distinctions. There's this here and there's that there. There's the mundane, there's the holy. There's the time before something, there's a time.
You need two for a relationship. These are all relationships. Yes. That's what the whole thing is, okay? Even before Adam and Eve, right? Bereshit, bara Elokim, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Remember haaretz, tohu v'vohu, constantly making these two different parts,
Yes.
That, and you need them. You have to have two sides of the coin, otherwise you don't have a coin. You need to have, and it's all. And like I said in the letter, sometimes it's about holding back rather than engaging. That's the dynamic of the relationship for its optimal purpose. And yeah, it's all that.
Right. So now bring it back to the conversation we're having. I think that sometimes it's important to distinguish between, okay, this thing, is it something we want to keep or something we want to incinerate? Is it something that's moving on in its healthy form,
right,
or not? So when we look at how pornography got in so deeply into Judaism, right? Meaning, forget Orthodox Judaism or that, it doesn't make a difference, right? There's people in the world who take Jewish concepts seriously, take Judaism seriously, take the Torah seriously and everything else. And they have not been more protected against this.
Right.
So we have against other things. It's not like there are other ways in which we've been more protected. I'm thinking if there's an example.
When you say seriously, by the way, do you mean by observancy or by actually doing the work, what it really authentically is?
I'm just saying there's people who care about it.
Right.
And it's not clear that there's a group that's been protected from it, which suggests that maybe there was a failure systemically. That's all I'm saying. So then we can go back and distinguish, okay, which ideas were good, which ideas were not. And as part of this new evolution, I'll give you one example.
How would we measure?
Okay, let's give you one example. You brought it up a few times on the podcast. Not how would we measure, but let's take something that's really unhealthy.
Okay.
Let's just take as rules. So when I grew up in Crown Heights, pretty much everyone looked the same,
Right.
right? When I went to yeshiva in Montreal, very religious community, a Chabad community, everything else, because the community is not large enough for everyone to look the same, there was a lot of variety, a lot
Okay.
more variety.
Okay.
Not a ton, but a lot more variety. And the same minyan, you have some guy who's Sephardic, some guy who's with a beard, without a beard,
Right.
keeping Shabbos, not keeping Shabbos, whatever. There was variety in that space, and I think that's super, super healthy. And while in Crown Heights, yes, there was also variety, there was a look.
Right.
Right? Meaning if someone was outside of that, it was very clear. Like, this is the look and this is outside. And then
Right.
you can walk in where it's not even clear. Which is the standard and who's breaking the standard.
Yeah.
I think that's very healthy as an example.
Yeah.
I think the fact that a lot of communities have become monolithic in speech, monolithic in style, monolithic in many different ways, right,
Yeah.
across the board, there's been one look. I think it's very, very unhealthy. And I think it's one of the ideas that you say, just get rid of it.
I agree with you. I do, and I'll say that like any other success, a big driver of any success I've had in my life, be that in myself, my development, or in the work I've done with other people, has been as a product of my experience of variety in the world. I mean, I'm blessed to have had in my lifetime 14 or 12 grandparents, however you want to say, 6 great grandparents. You know, thank God I've got amazing parents. There's just a few of them, but they're all amazing, you know, in different respects at different times. And that variety really gave me a tool to dissolve the little self-made me, which keeps you stuck in one mode of thinking. You know, it gives you this way to like tap into different energies, different resources, different mentalities, and not get so caught up in yourself, because you realize you are constantly evolving. This is temporary, etc., etc., etc. You are not you. You know, you are. That's it. You are. You know.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think someone is able to arrive at those conclusions much quicker when they don't feel like there's a box one
agree.
needs to
agree.
fit into. I've found in my own life that it's taken a lot more. I've had to tap in much deeper into resources that I hope my kids and others growing up today don't need to, just in order to be somewhat individual. It shouldn't be so difficult. It should be celebrated so at its most formative ages. You see it with 2 or 3 different children. I just had a new baby. Her energy and affect is completely different than my last child.
Yeah.
They're a different person. And
Yeah.
I don't know that growing up that was celebrated. In my home, listen, I come from my parents, right? So these ideas lived in them before they lived in me. But in the society I grew up in, there definitely was, like, it felt like everyone was trying to look the same way, speak the same way, think the same way.
No, don't get us wrong. Like there is a value to bottle the halal, like to be annulled in the many. So for example, you go to the 3 foot festivals in Russia, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos, at the Kotel, and everyone's wrapped in these talises in this one sea of white. And in those sort of moments, or you know, in Yom Kippur, whatever it is, there are moments, you know, in a stadium, whatever it is, that you appreciate the value of just becoming a rock in the mountain, a drop of water in the ocean, a grain of sand. In, there is a value to that. Ad can, you know, until where, you know, that is not when it's jammed into everyday life. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that experience.
Yes.
My parents.
Yeah, that experience of everyone being under a talus is a bunch of different people now being brought into one. That's what's special.
Right.
Not a bunch of the same people brought into one.
So yeah, my parents, you know, treated every child according to the each their own, you know, which was phenomenal for me. I got away with everything. My siblings got hell, but you know, like, absolutely, that was drilled in at a young age to like take each person for their own, and yeah, I have them to thank. But I agree with what you're saying, and it's that there is one of the flaws, one of the fingers we can metaphorically point to that's causing a provocation of this issue.
Right.
Lack of identity.
Yeah, I wasn't looking to go too deep into it. I was just broad strokes. As you're looking at it, it's like, are you seeing this as a problem with porn, or maybe something deeper systemically that has to be addressed?
No, porn is not the problem. Porn is a symptom, you know? The presence of porn and all of that. I mean, I don't know if I actually agree with that. But all I can say is that I do believe that were our lives to be filled with the ecstasy that our tradition can bring, that fire of pornography would be a faint glow in the corner. You would look at it. Maybe you've had this experience. You were addicted to pornography. You stopped 7 months, and then one night you watch it 7 months later, and you look at the screen. You're like, seriously? Like, I can see them acting. I can see how fake this is. I can see like that's what had me wrapped for years and years and years. Now you watch that for like 25 minutes, and then you're back into the hole. For the first 10 minutes, you have to like almost force yourself to do it. Like sort of like I can see the facade. Don't know if you had that experience, but
there's not a fresh one that comes to mind. I did have scary feelings when I was deep in pornography or sex addiction, where the same experience didn't hit the way I imagined it would, which means the way it did previously. And I was like, oh my goodness, like that doesn't have the allure and the.
Yeah, that's what
but where that went to was in a deeper way. But I did hear someone say this the other night, because Avi Wolf and I started doing a monthly Farbrengen at the House of More, whatever Farbrengen means. And what we invite is that real conversation. People talking, what are they struggling with? Are they struggling in their marriage? Are they struggling that the outside they're forced to, or they feel forced to look very religious, but they're struggling with all of, with whether even God exists or beliefs. Those kind of conversations can happen. And one guy shared that he's been on the path free of pornography and sex addiction for a long time. And the night before, 2 nights before Farbrengen, he went there and he's like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
What is this? How did I get so sucked into this thing for so many years? So I did hear it from others, yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he shared this exactly. Yeah, so earlier you said, and I guess we can end with this, is that when you were a teenager and you have, the enemy is large, and the enemy is mighty, and the enemy has a lot of craftiness and tools and power. And on the other end, there's a Rav who's, trying to use language to talk around the issue. Okay. And that's not even a fair fight. Okay, so what is a fair fight? Share some of the 3, 4, or 5 elements that you envision for for the future world.
Right. So first and foremost, like I've said a few times, Guard Your Eyes is the resource that is there right now. Okay, it's there. They have all these different methods. You don't need me to give you a whole long sugi right now about do this, do that. I can and I will.
Yeah, those are, but like you said,
that exists in all its different formats.
But that's also preventative.
No, I very clearly said it's not preventative. It's intervention.
I'm saying intervention. That's what I meant. But meaning that's so on a preventative scale. What is
right? I'll share. But again, I'm not so convinced that you can prevent these things. It's just about once it hits, how do we make it hit once or maybe twice so you get the education and then you move on with your life, But let's go to preventative, right?
Okay.
Obviously, it starts with education. Obviously, okay? So you got to get kids as young as it is, and you have to infuse into their lives a joy and a passion that when they come across pornography, they're going to look at it and they are not going to be completely enwrapped because they've lived a rote, mundane life in a household that does nothing special, nothing enigmatic, whatever. And then that's number one, right? Education, both in general, that they fall in love with Torah, they fall in love with.
So ideally, the average school wouldn't need someone like you to come by. It would have it built into their.
That's the fact that doesn't exist is crazy. The yeshivas, 1 or 2 yeshivas that I know have a live-in therapist, I guess you could say. They're completely overrun, and they still are not of the generation, so they don't have the language. But you have to have present people on the ground for this issue itself, right? Education is a big factor. Tell the kids what they're about to run into before they run into it blindly and think their parents are just doing that,
So what you envision is almost letting children know on the front end
100%.
that this monster exists.
100%.
And here are tools to support.
100%.
Okay, so that's very interesting because instead of our traditional approach there has been, let's not talk about it.
I wish. I agree.
Right.
Keep their innocence. Let them sail, please God, 11, 12, 13. If I could get it to 20, I would love it. They just don't have to ever let them idle around.
But it's not realistic. You can't get in the subway without that.
So that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I wish that was the case. I don't want to be telling 10-year-olds about pornography. I don't want to. But I'd rather that I told them about it and they found out about it for themselves.
Right. And you're saying at this stage they will, so just address it. Okay,
exactly.
So there is almost like you walk into a school and there's I don't know, literally, but there's like sign on the door, this guy's a counselor for pornography.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But less that you have to go to him, that he comes to you or she comes to you and in a very warm and inviting way. That's stage 1. Okay. Stage 2. Whilst I've got all these tools to stop the bleeding in the moment, and I've got all these tools to like help you plan all the rest, which are lovely, it's back to that same drawing board. If your life is not being oriented towards something, if you're a teenager and that's just towards your teams, your academia, and your friendships, that's fine. Whatever it is in your extracurricular. But if you aren't being oriented towards those things and then systematically planning your days around that, so you don't have all this free time, you are aiming towards direction, you're going to fall and you're going to stay in the pit. It's just that simple. And finally...
And you know what's needed for that, by the way?
What?
A strong embrace of someone's individuality.
Exactly.
Right?
And that requires not just to tell them, like, you know, go and play football, but you should be making your kids try many things, you know, at a young age. Try many things and make mistakes. That should be encouraged. You look at children, they're always walking around the world trying to figure out what on earth is going on, eyes wide open, free of care. That's how they're meant to be. Let them find their niche. Let them find their way to serve themselves and the world around them.
Right.
That's that. And then finally, most importantly, is accountability. You need to have connection.
And that's where you saw that buddy system as something that can be...
That's one example. But yes. Yeah, you need that. You need that. So, yeah.
What role do you feel like technology plays in prevention, intervention?
Right. So, you know, Apple, they have the bitten apple as their logo. It's like good or evil, you know, choose what you're going to use this for. Yeah. So, like, you know, the Rebbe was a big fan of using technology to spread positive messaging, to reach more people, etc., etc. I'm a big fan of that, you know. I mean, I wish that, like, we isolated our time in technology and we put aside time for completely authentic activity. But obviously it's there to educate us. It's there to connect us. It's there to provide resources if we fall into these things. All those things.
Meant in terms of these tools like filters and some of these other things. What role do you think that plays, or it won't help anyway? People get around it.
So filters, yeah, like, I mean, like, obviously I'd say, if my phone has a filter, get a filter rather than don't have a filter. I completely support that, you know? But it is a very short-term method to prevent what's going to ultimately happen either through another device, or you can't put a filter on masturbation addiction. You can't, you know, like, all these sorts of things. It has to be a far more
comprehensive solution.
It's valuable. And I'm glad that someone woke up one day and said, let me help. But, you know, the idea that, like, go get a filter. Okay.
Right. I think that's important for some parents will say, okay, so I'll put a filter on my kid's device.
Okay, give me any filter. I'll just download the VPN and I'll get around it. It says any 7-year-old today who just knows anything about anything. He knows it through his gaming console. Then in order to, like, not be seen as in America, so you can play the UK game or the other way around, you have to download this VPN. So I'll just download the VPN, which will override the whole firewall or whatever it is. And kids are very smart these days. I don't even know what they're doing. You know?
Right, understood. Okay, I appreciate it. I was excited when I spoke to you about year plus ago, and I'm excited now that you're stepping further into this work with Guard Your Eyes and otherwise. I think the world needs many people like you. I'm glad you found your purpose and passion.
Grateful to be here.
Thank you to Porn.
Thank you
for helping you.
Yeah, let's see where this goes, you know?
Find that, get the beautiful lesson that it has to teach us, and move on to get other lessons and give other lessons.
Amen.
Thank you, Saadiah Daniel.
Thank you.
Appreciate coming on. I'm sure this is not the last we'll be hearing from you.
No, not at all. It's about to smash through